Okay, let's do a quick review for a tiny camera. So I want to talk about why I took the Fujifilm XF-10 to New York City and why I have no regrets of that decision. So to break it down, let's talk about pros and trade-offs because I think all cameras probably have pros and trade-offs. And to start off with the pros, it's pocketable. It's actually pocketable. Not only in just like regular pants, but also especially in like a big winter jacket, which is exactly what I wore to New York. And for extra context, I was going to New York for a work function and a tattoo. It was going to be like a week-long trip in the Northeast, New York, Philly, Delaware, New Jersey. And I wanted something that I could take photos with if I wanted to, but didn't feel any pressure to take photos with. I didn't want to wear a neck strap. I didn't want to have to make extra space in my bag for anything. And so I've never taken this on a trip, and it felt like the perfect first opportunity. Not only is it pocketable, but the image quality is fantastic. That is my second pro. I think oftentimes with point and shoots, when you take a photo, sometimes it can be hard to tell if that photo was taken with a smartphone or with a point and shoot, especially when you have smaller sensor sizes. But because this is APS-C, because the lens is so sharp, and because the images are so detailed, I feel like even when I shoot at f8, I can tell it came from this camera. And that's really nice, especially because it makes it feel like it's worth bringing an extra tool to take photos with. And it's really enjoyable to use. I think the build quality is pretty solid. It doesn't feel heavy, but it doesn't feel light. It's kind of that in between of it feels substantial. It feels like it could survive a drop. I haven't dropped it yet. I hope I never drop it, but yeah, it feels well built. And I think that's another reason that it feels like a nice tool to have in my hand versus just a phone. And then I also want to talk about how one focal length makes this camera more attractive to me. So I think sometimes with point and shoots, especially the smaller sensor ones, they have huge zoom ranges, like anywhere from like 24 to 200, 24 to 120 or something like that. And to me, that is really convenient. It makes a lot of sense for a lot of people. But for me, I think it's nice to just have one focal length because the more I use the camera, the more I'm in tune with what that image is going to look like before I take it. And so that means a lot of times I was composing with my mind before I brought this camera out, which makes it even more perfect for point and shoot because I'm not spending a bunch of time with the camera in front of my face. I am enjoying my day, enjoying my trip, whatever, and I take it out, I take a photo, I put it right back into my pocket. And I think something else that this camera has that offers some flexibility is that the minimum focus distance is pretty short. And so you're able to get a good variety of some different types of photos, close-ups, landscapes, cityscapes, all sorts of things, all in one pretty compact and lightweight package. So big fan of that. And I think the last point that I want to make in the pro section is that it's super non-threatening. I think a lot of people see this camera and feel a little bit of nostalgia of like a digicam age. And so when I was at my work function, people wanted to pick it up, take photos with it, and I love it when I can come back from a trip with a photo of me, not just the photos I took of people and places and things. So yeah, and the shutter is really quiet. It has a flash, so it's great for like lots of different types of situations. It just feels like there's a lot of really good things in terms of variety and flexibility with this camera. And I think the last thing that I want to mention in the pro section is the battery life. As I mentioned, I was just kind of taking it out of my pocket, turning it on, taking a photo, putting it back. But I did end up shooting between like 20 and 60 photos a day, and I never dropped below 50% battery. I'm not even sure if I got under 75%. So I was really pleased with the battery life. I think especially with such a small camera in such a cold environment, I thought that I was going to have to be, charging it pretty frequently, but it was really just a once a day kind of situation for me, and that was really, really nice. But let's shift gears. Let's talk about the trade-offs because all cameras, if not most cameras, have trade-offs. And I think the first one is the one that you hear about the most when people consider this camera, the focusing capabilities. I would like to start off this section by saying I don't feel like I've missed any photos because of the autofocus capabilities, but I also think that because it's a point and shoot, I approach it a lot differently than some of my other cameras. So if you were going to take an A7 IV and try to transfer that autofocus experience into this camera, you will be very disappointed. But if you think that you're going to use this camera like a typical point and shoot, meaning that you're going to capture wider scenes or you're going to use larger apertures like f8 and above, you probably won't really have any issues. Especially like if you can focus on a building, then most of the other stuff in that scene is going to be in focus, which is how I mostly approach this. You can definitely switch to the single autofocus setting and it will be a little bit snappier, and I can show some photos where I was able to capture a little bit quicker action, a little bit quicker movement. But I think if you're trying to follow around a pet or a kid, or if you are hoping to do like street photography, this probably isn't the right camera for that specific setup. But I do think it's more than capable, especially if you're using it more for memories than for specific fast action kind of photo shoots. So the second trade-off that I want to mention is that over ISO like 1600, things get pretty muddy in the noise department. And I don't think that's a huge issue, especially with some of the AI, denoise tools that we have available to us now. But I also don't think it's an issue because it has an on-camera flash. And so I leave mine locked at ISO 800, and whenever I need a little bit more light in that scene, I'll just make sure the flash is on. Honestly, most of the time I leave flash on auto unless I know I don't want it to turn on, and I haven't really had any issues with that at all. You can also control the power of the flash, like if you want it to be brighter or dimmer, and I think that's a great feature as well. So yeah, over ISO 1600 can get muddy, but I don't really see myself in a situation where I'm going to be above that. And then for the last trade-off for this camera, I want to mention that the film simulations are a little bit lackluster, especially compared to my X Pro 3, where I feel like I have a lot of flexibility in all the different settings that I can change. There isn't really that much to change in these settings, and because of that, I'm mostly shooting RAW, which hasn't been an issue. I mean, I'm no stranger to editing RAW files. I think it would be really cool though, to just be able to take this around with me, take a photo, and then that photo is ready to be stored, shared, whatever. So I definitely see why some people can be so drawn to the Ricos for that reason. But I just can't justify that price right now, but maybe if it changes in the future, if a new one comes out, I could. But overall, I was really pleased with this camera. I did not regret bringing just this. In fact, I think that in the future, I will try to include this camera more as a secondary camera. So like last year when we went to London, I took the X Pro 3 and I took the film point and shoot. I just love having something that after a long day of exploring or whatever, you can just throw in a bag. If you take photos, great. If you don't, no worries. And this camera fits that bill perfectly. So I do think I'll try to make sure that I pack it in more bags, especially because I think it's a little bit more flexible than my film point and shoot. But I do love shooting film, so I guess it just kind of depends on the scenarios. But I would definitely prefer this in lower light or nighttime situations than the film camera. So yeah, I think I'll definitely be putting in more bags. I'll definitely be taking it on more little mini trips where photography isn't the main goal. And I'm really happy that I bought a pocket camera. I think that they can be really beneficial for lots of people, but also just photographers who, I don't want to say have lost the joy of photography, but feel a little bit of a burden by photography, like all the gear you have to pack, all the time it takes to compose. I think having a pocketable camera with one focal length definitely kind of lets you get into a bit of a groove where you don't feel like you're holding up your day or really taking any more time than it would have taken to take out your iPhone or your smartphone or whatever to capture that photo. So yeah. I also was able to capture a lot of photos in that trip, and so I have a little bit of video footage from the Insta360 Go 3 and my iPhone, and so I'll probably try to weave some of that into like a POV video, so that will likely be my next post. But until then, I hope you have a good one.